Hello there, everyone, and this is the very first club exclusive Parks and Bennis podcast. And as I'm sure many of you will know through following me on social media and whatnot, the first episode, well, the first team we've decided on for this episode, thanks to the famous Twitter poll, is Burnley. And for the Burnley episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Redmond from Turfcast podcast. You all right, mate?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How's the pod going?
Yeah, good. It's good to be on season 2 of the pod. And you'll know Owen, but for those of you that don't, I tend to do a lot of sort of like streaming stuff with it these days. That tends to be more what we're going towards now, rather than just an audio podcast. I do like watch-alongs, quizzes, stuff like that, live feeds and stuff like that. So that tends to be the direction that we're going in. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's sometimes overtakes work and personal life. So it's interesting to see how we'll get on with that over the next years or whatever. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it, to be honest.
For someone who didn't really used to listen to non-Everton podcasts, I've got to say yours is a great podcast, and I must recommend it to everyone. Can you just sort of plug what your is with like Twitter and YouTube and that?
Yeah. So it's literally just Turfcast podcast on everything. Like, this is a bit of a Turfcast exclusive for you, but I am thinking of sort of like rebranding and changing the name a little bit. I haven't decided what it's going to be yet. Mainly because, like I said, Turfcast podcast. It's in the name, isn't it? The word cast and podcast are both in the name, and as I said, I'm aiming more towards streaming and things like that at the minute. So I'm thinking of a rebrand over the next few months, but I'm literally just thinking out loud about it. I haven't decided on anything yet.
For any of your listeners who've just decided to listen to this because it's Burnley, you'll be getting 120 messages now saying you didn't tell us this.
I know, yeah. I've not even, like I said, I've kind of just mentioned it to my co-host Simon like recently, and he was similar sort of vibe. He's like, well, you built up a name, like why would you want to change it? It's like, I want a couple of things. Like I said, we don't just do podcasts. We do a lot of things now. So I want a name that reflects what we do. And I also want a name that's sort of like standalone in itself. So, say for example, if I chose We Are Burnley and I wanted to start doing like We Are Burnley merch, people would wear it even though they don't listen to the podcast. But if I wanted to do merch that just says Turfcast podcast, people aren't going to wear it, are they?
No, suppose not. Like I said, the two options for this podcast was going to be Burnley or Brighton, and Aaron is fuming in the corner that it's not his beloved Graham Potter's Brighton that we're discussing today.
I can confirm I'm not fuming. I'm actually looking forward to this one.
Great, that's the spirit. So I think the best way to start this is dissecting every single part of the club, and I think if you went round the streets of pretty much anywhere and said Burnley, I think the first word that would be told to you from most people would be Sean Dyche, and Sean Dyche celebrates 8 years in charge of Burnley. I don't know, I've seen 7 different dates where he's celebrating 8 years. I'm taking it today because I've seen more of it. But,
yeah, it's today.
Yeah, it's today. So Sean Dyche celebrating 8 years in charge of Burnley. For anyone who follows me on social media, or I'm sure Aaron knows, I'm a huge fan of Sean Dyche and his teams. Not only his Burnley team, but I've been doing a bit of reading into his Watford team, and he did fairly good things at Watford as well, mid-table, in his first year in management, which I thought was pretty decent. But obviously, he will be known for the job he's done at Burnley. Before we go into any kind of specifics, I'll just come to both of you. I'll start with you, Joe. Sean Dyche is a manager. Obviously, I think you'll rate him fairly highly because you're a fan of Burnley, and obviously he's took you through Europe and top halves and that. But just give me a bit of insight into what your sort of instant thoughts on Sean Dyche are.
I mean, obviously, like you say, I'm a Burnley fan, so look at where we were 8 years ago compared to where we are now. Admittedly, it's not all Sean Dyche. The board have got to have some credit up until recent years for that. But for me, he's the most underrated manager in English football, to be honest. I mean, look at the job he's done with the budget that he's had, and tell me that someone like I see these stupid Twitter polls of managers and things like that, and you see people putting Potter above him and Solskjaer and Lampard and you know, and you just think, what have they done to get anywhere near Sean Dyche in these sort of polls when he's done what he's done for Burnley Football Club? Like I said, all you have to do if you don't agree and things like that. I know a lot of people, especially like football Twitter and that, get sort of like blinded by the I won't call it an anti-Burnley agenda, but sort of like the negative feeling towards Burnley being in the Premier League, and get sort of like blinded by the similar sort of thing with Dyche, mainly because of his style of football or whatever. But look at where we were 8 years ago when we took over, compared to look at where we are now. And by that, I don't mean 17th in the Premier League. I mean like we're an established Premier League club, European football, new training ground, which he was a large part in being part of. So yeah, he's obviously I love him, and I think he's right up there in terms of Premier League managers and very highly rated in terms of English managers, definitely.
Aaron, your sort of thoughts on Sean Dyche before we go into sort of specifics?
Yeah, I think there's no denying the job he's done at Burnley. I mean, going back to when he was back at Watford, I mean, he took us. I mean, after being with our academy initially, after Malcolm Mackay left, he was promoted to the first team, and he took us to our highest finish since we were promoted, pretty much. I mean, we were promoted under Eddie Boothwood in 06-07, spent a year in the Prem, went down. Year after that, we finished in the playoffs, but after we failed to come up that year, in 07-08, I think it was, we were just a mid-table side, lower mid-table. But Sean Dyche took over in his first season as a manager. He took us to our highest finish, up in 11th. Now, obviously, there was controversy at the time when the Pozo takeover happened, and he probably unfairly lost his job after a pretty solid season. But I think there's no denying that decision worked out for the best for everyone. We're better off in this case talking about Burnley. That's probably been a masterstroke for them. I think he was appointed a couple months into the season. I'm not sure where they were, but I do remember around that time they were probably relegation favourites. He took them up in 13-14, had a year in the Prem, but I think he needed that year in the Prem to get to grips with it. And since then, I think he's really shown to be one of Burnley's best ever coaches.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think obviously Harry Potts gets talked about a lot in terms of Burnley folklore, but I think in the context of the modern era, how difficult it is to be successful in the Premier League now, I think there's no one that can argue that pound for pound, I think across the leagues since then, I don't think anyone's quite met what Sean Dyche has done in terms of what he's been given and what he's sort of given back. I think obviously we're going to talk about the off-the-pitch stuff, takeovers, certain players' improvements across this sort of time period, but the sort of stability across it all is Sean Dyche. And I was recently watching the High Performance podcast, that I don't know if any of you've seen it, with Sean Dyche on, and the way he speaks about recruitment, the sort of mentality to training, not even talking about tactics at this point, it's to do with the stuff that people don't see, the day-to-day training etiquette kind of stuff. And I think the way he controls all that is fantastic. And I think as a human being, he comes across quite confrontational in the media when people see him after game moaning about diving or barely not getting a penalty for the 400th game running or whatever. But that's because obviously he cares about Burnley because he's been there a while now. But not just that. If you watch some of his other stuff, you listen to him away from football, he's a really decent bloke as well. And I think I don't know where he will go post Burnley, and I think we'll probably discuss that later on in the podcast. But I think he would be an asset for any club, and he's a really good manager. Moving on slightly to tactics, obviously Joe will be able to give us maybe a bit more insight in terms of what happened with Eddie Howe at Burnley and before that. But obviously Dyche has come in and played 4-4-2, pretty much non-stop really. I did have a laugh at an article in The Athletic today where I read that Ian Woan said he laughed when Burnley changed to a 4-3-3 last season against Aston Villa, and it came across the Sky News ticket that they changed formation because they've never changed formation. So I found that quite funny. We're on the 4-4-2. Obviously, Burnley sits often in a low block. He sort of encouraged the attacking team to play the ball out wide. Obviously, get crosses in and then they defend them. And then in attack, get accused of being a long ball team, but I'm not really sure lately they have been a long ball team. I think they obviously they don't play out from the back. They obviously miss the midfield out from defence, but with McNeil and Westwood, they're the two key men for me in this. McNeil and Westwood. Burnley try and play some kind of nice stuff when they have the ball at their best with McNeil and Westwood. We'll start with sort of McNeil. I'll go with Joe because obviously Joe watched every game probably of McNeil. I feel like I've been a bit disappointed this season from Dwight McNeil, but obviously, how important is he, would you say, to this sort of Burnley story in the last 18 months or so?
Yeah, incredibly, really. And that's not underestimating him because he's, like you said, he has been disappointing this season. He's had 1.5 good games this season, and they're the only 2 times that we played well this season. So that just kind of shows. But if you look at what happened when he originally brought through into the team, it was the year that we were in the Europa League, or were briefly in the Europa League qualifiers, and we started the season incredibly poor because of that, and then Dwight was sort of like found his way into the team due to injuries, and then that's when our form picked up because he came into the team and then just sort of like picked up the confidence because we suddenly had somebody that wanted to get the ball at the feet and run with it, and nobody wanted to do that at Burnley since Andre Gray left, really, and he didn't really do that in the Premier League. Really, Andre Gray only really did it in the Championship because the Premier League, you weren't really good enough to do it, to be honest. But yeah, it were incredible because it just came in. This teenager came in. I think he was about 17 at the time. And he was just running at defenders, and we're like, oh, go on, then. He's getting the crowd off the feet. He's getting us 30, 40 yards up the pitch. And then he scored a really important goal against, I think it was West Ham that season, another one against Wolves that season, and there were 2 massive wins that we had. And then the season just kind of turned around, really, and it just sort of like turned around in the time when he came into the team. So yeah, he has been class, and I agree with you. He has been disappointing this season. He played well against West Brom, but that's the only really time I'll probably say that he's played well so far this season. He had an all right game against Tottenham, but Tottenham obviously a different opponent and a different sort of game. So whether he only played well against West Brom because it's just West Brom, no offence to any West Brom fans listening, but obviously they're favourites to go down and stuff. So you'd expect people to pick more points up against them, against a team with less quality, I think it's fair to say, than Tottenham. We'll see, but obviously he's just signed a new contract, which is good for us. So it means if he does leave, we'll get several £1 million. So yeah, he's been a huge part of the story for, like you say, the last 18 months. We just hope that he can continue that because at the minute he's not doing.
Yeah, the thing with me with Dwight McNeil is his style of play. I think we're going to talk about positives to his game now but in a minute. But I think I want to start off with something that really irritates me with Dwight McNeil, and is that he doesn't track back. And for me, in this Burnley system that requires such hard work, I find that at times he just doesn't sort of endear himself to that enough. Now, maybe that could be a sign of Burnley evolving, maybe slightly better on the ball, move the ball through the lines a lot more. But I just feel like as we get along, I think at clubs he will need to. He will be our club eventually. No disrespect to Burnley, I think he's going to move on at some point. And the point he moves on, he will not be the best player in that team. I think at the moment, offensively, he's Burnley's best player. As you just said, anytime Burnley have played well, it's because he's played well. But there will be a point where he isn't Burnley, the best player in the team. And so there will be a lot more required for him in terms of doing everything else. Because I think at the moment, when you've got sort of 9 other men, or outfield players who are willing to work hard, I think it can be quite easy to be the one outlier sort of creating everything to not do that. But there will become a point where he will have to fit into a team effort a lot more because he isn't the best player. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops as a player. Obviously, he's known for getting crosses in the box. I think his dribbling numbers for a Burnley player the team who doesn't really dribble, I think Burnley have had league bottom stats for dribbling in the past couple of seasons. So for him to be the only sort of outball for them is really clear and good to see. And it's a sign for me of Dyche sort of evolving slightly and giving the trust to someone like Neil. where they've not really had that type of player before. I think they've had Stephen before, but not really the same level as Neil. Aaron, have you got any thoughts on Dwight McNeil?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Dwight McNeil. I remember when he first broke through, and I was more curious than anything to see how he would develop. He's certainly Burnley's brightest talent, and I think he's quite underrated generally among young English players. It's safe to say his best quality is probably his crossing, and I'm sure he'll add goals to his game as he develops as a player. But yeah, I think he's certainly got a bright future, and he's going to be a big part of Burnley moving forward.
I don't really want to put you on the spot here, Joe, but obviously, do you see him at Burnley long term, or do you see a bigger team coming in from? What sort of level are we talking about with Dwight McNeil?
I think it's the same with anyone from Burnley. You very rarely see people leave Burnley and go somewhere like Liverpool straight away, or where Liverpool are at now, or your Chelseas or your Cities. I think there's always them middle sort of clubs where I think he has to go to next. Basically, I always found that the two middle clubs are always Leicester or Everton, funnily enough. He'll have to go somewhere like that before he can go to the very top and prove that he can do it at somewhere like Everton or Leicester, before he can play for somebody like Chelsea, also Liverpool, etc. I do think he can play for one of them clubs. Probably not Liverpool where they're at now. I think Liverpool and City, I think he's probably... That might be a bit of a stretch too far, but obviously at the minute he's got a lot of developing to do, so who knows, he could be one day. But I think he'll play for England, and I think he'll play for England quite a lot as well. I've actually got a bet with some lads at work.
Yeah.
Because I was chatting to him at the Christmas party last time. I actually fell out with him, to be honest. And I did an argument, no, typical Joe. I'm like, oh, we've heard of him, he's alright. Like, what do you mean he's alright? I'm telling you now, we'll play for England. They're all like taking piss. Like, no, he won't, no chance. So I'm like, I'll bet you 50 quid now, every single one of you here that he'll play for England. And they're like, alright, then we're going to take this bet, so there needs to be rules. So the bets are that he has to play more than 10 games for the England senior level, and I'll get about 200 quid, but 100%, you know what it's like. You make one of these bets and they won't pay out, or I won't work there anymore. But the point is, I'm that confident that he will play for England regularly and stuff like that, and I do think he can develop into one of them players.
Yeah, he's sort of the first player I wanted to mention in terms of like specific players before we talk about the more general, broader themes of Burnley. And the next player I want to bring up is someone who fascinates me enormously, and I think he's probably one of the players in the Premier League who intrigues me the most. And I'm going to say his name now, and you're going to be like, why on earth does he intrigue you the most? Chris Wood. As I've said to Aaron before you became on here, Joe, I think he was born offside, but but I think he's got such a knack of scoring goals, getting in good positions, just helping the ball in the back of the net. I think he's become one of the most important players to this Burnley story. Obviously, he'll probably have his critics because he isn't great 1v1, he isn't quick, and like I said, he's born offside, but he's still such an effective player, and I think if you're going to play an effective brand of football, you need a Chris Wood. So you might just tell me he's absolutely rubbish, and I don't know why I'm interested in him, but what is it about Chris Wood?
I absolutely love Chris Wood, and he gets so much stick, man, and he's such a nice guy. My friend cuts his hair, and I've met him a couple of times. They're actually like 2 or 3 weeks ago last time I met him and spoke to him and stuff. He's really sound lad and stuff, and he's like, for example, my friend that I'm talking about, Owen, you'll know him. He's Simon, who does the podcast with me.
Yeah.
And he's recently broke his legs and stuff. And the first thing that Chris did when he came in, like, they were talking to Simon, making sure he's all right and stuff. And all. He's just such a nice guy. But obviously, that's not why we're here to talk about his football. Yeah, he is born offside, but so was Andre Gray when he played for Burnley. So for me, it's that Andre Gray's, obviously, Aaron will know more being a Watford fan. He can be offside a lot, but I think it's more Dyche tells them to play on the last shoulder of the defender, or the shoulder of the defender, and things like that. And they constantly make him runs as soon as their balls come over the thing. So, yeah, Chris Wood is offside a lot, but I think it's more a case of what Dyche tells his players to do. Because, like I said, just look at Andre Gray when he was at Burnley; he was exactly the same. So I think that the common denominator there is obviously Sean Dyche, rather than the strikers themselves. But he is, pound for pound, the best finisher of a football that I've ever seen at Burnley Football Club. If you want a ball fall to somebody in a box, it's Chris Wood. He will 99 times out of 100 put it away. The only problem with Chris is he's a very, very, very big confidence player. So if he's not scoring goals, he starts looking dreadful and he starts looking a bit disinterested and things like that. His body language changes, and I think at the minute he's in one of them periods because he had the game against West Brom where he had that relatively easy chance. It's an easy chance for Chris Wood anyway, but none of us three would have put it away. But Chris Wood should have put that header away because it's Chris Wood and that's his strength. And then there's the other one that are a bit of a snap chance. But this time last season, put it this way, to score both of them, and we won that game quite comfortably. He needs a goal at the minute. He needs a goal for his confidence, and I think once he starts scoring goals, fingers crossed, we'll start edging away from danger. But yeah, I love Chris Wood, and he gets too much stick, like you say, because he turns slower than milk. A lot of people give him shit for saying he don't have much pace, but if you actually watch him, it's just because he's tall. He don't look like he's running that fast, but he's nippy. He's not well fast. For example, Andre Gray, I know I keep going back to it, but obviously it's an easy comparison to make because he was our last main striker. Andre Gray is obviously a lot faster and things like that. So in a sprint race, he's all right. I'd say he'd beat Harry Maguire in a sprint race, put it that way, and some other Premier League defenders. But it's because he's always got his back to goal. As Chris Wood, and he's holding the ball up and things like that, and honestly, he turns so slowly. It's when he's turning, he just looks so slow. So a lot of people think he's ridiculously slow, but in terms of actual sprinting and stuff, he's not that bad. But yeah, I love Woody. Like I said, if I want a chance to fall to anybody in the Burnley side, I want it to fall to Chris Wood. And I always go back to the Olympiacos game at home a couple of years ago. We had so many chances in that game. And for some reason, Dyche rested Woody that game and played Vokesy and Barnsley. If three of them chances that we had fell to Wood, we'd have won that game comfortably. But they all fell to Sam Vokes, and as much as we love Sam Vokes, he weren't as good as a finisher as Wood, and we ended up losing the game.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a big fan of Chris Wood, and I think he's not good. I think he was linked with Lazio in the summer. Tell me if I'm wrong, but he was linked with Lazio.
Yeah. He came out of nowhere. And I remember being a bit worried, to be honest, at the time, because he's been our leading goal scorer for the last 3 seasons. But I'm not sure if it were just agent talk or anything like that. I think I did mention it to him, actually. Like I said, when I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and he just sort of laughed. And he didn't give anything away, obviously, but the laugh sort of made it suggest that maybe it was a load of rubbish. But that's just me trying to read between the lines. Jeff Hendrick were linked with AC Milan as well and things like that. So I'm not sure if Italian newspapers were doing a lot of stuff trying to get some publicity for their clients or whatever, or for their teams. I'm not sure, but yeah, put it this way: if it had left, we'd have been in a lot more trouble than what we are now.
Yeah, Aaron, Chris Wood.
It's seemingly obvious for me that he's a very good finisher. When he gets into the box, when he gets chances, you'd probably back him to score 9 times out of 10. I think he's a fantastic target man. Again, like with his finishing, I'd probably back him to win most headers. And I'm curious to see what Joe thinks of who his best strike partner would be, because I know they've got Jay Rodriguez, Matej Vidra, and Ashley Barnes, but they all seem to be different types of strikers. But I mean, as a Watford fan, I'm used to seeing the big man little man partnership quite a lot with Deeney, with Vidra and Igalo, etc. Chris Wood is the same in terms of having a big man little man partnership, but like I said, his strike partners are all different types of strikers.
I think for me, I like him up top with Jay Rodriguez personally. I think it works well. If you just look at how well we played last season, like in after Christmas towards March sort of period, and then after lockdown had finished and we started up again, we were playing with Chris Wood and Jay Rod up top, and I think that's no coincidence. To be honest, at this stage last season, I'd have said Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes, but I'm thinking Ashley Barnes is probably getting a little bit past his best or whatever now. Like, don't get me wrong, Ashley Barnes is a shithouse. I'll always love him. If we need to ruffle a few feathers, get Ashley Barnes on, ruffle them up, do what you do, throw some elbows about, kiss a few Cardiff players and stuff like that, and get butt for it, and things like that. And if we need to stretch the defence, obviously you bring Vidra on because he's your fastest and the nippy player. But if I'm going to choose Woody's best strike partnership, it's definitely going to be Jay. I'd say.
Yeah, I think I said to you the other week, why isn't Jay Rodriguez playing next to Chris Wood? Because for me, it's the obvious. I think Rodriguez is the most. This is dangerous, the most dynamic of your forwards in terms of ability to run 1v1. I think they're just good, but he's someone who's like on the shoulder and you play a ball over the top for him to chase. I think Barnsley is a bit more of a target man like Chris Wood. And I think Rodriguez, he can do a bit of everything. I think he just complements the play a lot more than any of the others. So I'll definitely say them. And I think the last player I want to talk about is, for me, I don't know how you feel about this, Joe, or even you, Aaron, but I think never mind one of the most underrated players in the Premier League or Burnley's team just around at the moment. For me, when I hear conversations about the best in this position, it doesn't seem to come up, and every time I watch him, he seems to be really, really good. Charlie Taylor. Obviously, Luca Dean's by far the best left back in all the world at the moment, and second is Niels Nkunku. But after that, Charlie Taylor. What do you think of Charlie Taylor?
I mean, obviously, again, a Burnley fan and he's a Burnley player and absolutely loving it. It was one of them. It were a good signing at the time, and now it looks even better because obviously Leeds were doing quite well in the Championship back then. I think they just missed out on the playoffs, and then we signed their two best players at the time, Charlie Taylor and Chris Wood, both came in the same summer. But yeah, he's class, and he's been Mr. Consistent. He's one of them, like, you never see him like really ripping up any trees and stuff. But if you actually watch his performance and just sort of like watch him, you realise how good he actually is. He can put a ball in, he can beat a man, he gets up and down the wing. And I think what helps him brilliantly is he complements Dwight absolutely fantastically. That left side that we have for Burnley, I think it's incredible. You've got Dwight McNeil just above Charlie Taylor, and yeah, he's a really, really good defender as well. And so the only thing I would critique him on is his heading. I think he can probably improve on his heading. But not many fullbacks are the best headers of the ball, really. They tend to be these days in modern football, all sort of like attacking sort of minded players. But yeah, he can beat a man. He's quite nippy as well. But yeah, he's got a hell of a cross on him as well. So yeah, it just fits Burnley perfectly because that's what you need. You need fullbacks who can put crosses in because of the type of strikers that we have. In terms of him never really being included in the conversation, I think it's because, like I say, when you watch a team game, he doesn't look like he's ripping up any trees. But if you actually just, like you say, Owen, just sit back and actually watch him. He is actually a very, very, very accomplished left back, and we're very lucky to have him, I think.
Yeah, he's someone who, I don't, maybe because he's like I said, he never gives rip-roaring performances. But when Leicester sold Ben Chilwell, I fully expected them to sign Charlie Taylor because I just thought that was the natural sort of succession for them and for Taylor. But there weren't even any links of it, was there?
No, thankfully. He's not, like you said, he's just not mentioned in any of these conversations, and it's the same with Itarki, really, and even Dash, and even Dwight. It's the same with pretty much anybody involved with Burnley.
Yeah.
It's one of them though. It works in our favour in the end. As frustrating as it is, that you want to see Burnley get more recognition. The fact that we don't actually helps us in the long term, really. So yeah, I would agree. I think it would have been a good succession and stuff and things like that. But for whatever reason it didn't. And it's the same with Tarky. I thought Tarky had been the perfect Leicester signing. I mean, obviously there was a bit more links and stuff there with that one. And as far as I'm aware, that there actually was talks and stuff which did break down. But again, he should be getting snapped up by these sort of teams, Tarky. But like I said, it works in our favour.
Should he be in the England squad?
I think he should. I think he should have been given a chance. I think he needs to be. I think he should be given a chance, definitely. Whether he should be in the England squad is 24/7, obviously not. But every England squad is another matter. Because there's a lot of good players in that position. Like you said, there's Chilwell and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, Southgate doesn't like Burnley players, or Burnley outfield players anyway. So obviously, Pope's probably going to be knocking on the door for number one soon. Obviously, depending on Pickford and whether he keeps making blunders and stuff, because he does quite well for England, to be fair, does Pickford. But that's another debate. But I think he should be given a chance, definitely. Is the point I'm trying to make. But until he's given that chance, he can't really show what he's done, what he can do. So it's one of them, really.
Yeah, we'll move on from on the pitch because I could talk all day about obviously Tarkowski, Ben Mee, Ashley Westwood. I just think there's so many key parts to this Burnley team. But they were the three main ones to me that go slightly under the radar in terms of the whole sort of picture of the Premier League. I think we'll move on now to sort of the off the pitch stuff. Obviously, there's rumours of takeovers galore at Burnley at the moment. Obviously, the ALK group have been linked with Alan Pace. Just before we were going to specifics, I got sent a WhatsApp message the other day of that I think there's a Burnley reporter sent a message out saying ALK are interested. The leader Alan Pace is a big admirer of Sean Dyche, and then someone put underneath Alan Pace and a picture of me. I'm not Alan Pace, to let everyone know. But obviously they've been linked with obviously taking over Burnley. There's another group with some Egyptian guy and some other guy, Peter Farnell.
Chris Farnell was it's bad news apparently. He's Farnell, but obviously if you want, we'll get into that.
Yeah, obviously Mike Garlick and obviously John Beers. I keep on hearing his name being mentioned. Don't know if he's still around or whatever. And Mike Rigg.
Well, Mike Rigg, I think John B and Mike Garlick, they originally took over Burnley at the same time and were sort of like holding it 50-50. I'm not sure what the exacts are at the minute, but John B's more of a background sort of person now, and Mike Garlick is the main person as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, obviously a lot of Burnley fans at the moment have been calling for Mike Garlick's head in terms of running the club. Obviously, Burnley only bought Dale Stevenson for, I think, about a £5 in the summer transfer window. Obviously, there was links, obviously, Craig Dawson, and early in the window, I was dreaming that they would buy Baptiste Santa Maria. Obviously, that didn't happen. But obviously, there's a lot of frustration on Dyche's part because Burnley aren't buying anyone. Obviously, they managed to keep out of James Tarkowski and Dwight McNeil and Dyche in the end. But it doesn't feel like the club are progressing in terms of investing in the team. Obviously, Burnley had a poor start of the season, so sort of this obviously fuel to the fire obviously adds to that because obviously if they'd won every game, no one would be mentioning that they didn't buy anyone. It's just football, it's all reactionary, but Joe, I think your ear will be a lot more on the ground on this in terms of what's happening. The takeover situation can give us a bit more of a knowledgeable update rather than me getting everyone's name wrong involved with that takeover.
The latest news is that Farnell and the Egyptian, like, and I'm not the best at pronouncing it, Mohamed El Kashashi or El Kashashi, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. They're now, according to reports, the front runners. However, ALK Capital, who are obviously the American firm, as you say, is it Alan Pace? They were chatting and talking to Mike Garlick for months, if not years on end, recently. And then all of a sudden, this Chris Farnell and the Egyptian lads come out of nowhere. Now they're the front runners, and apparently contracts have been exchanged. Now I've never bought a football club before, but that to me sounds like it's quite close. Every contract I've ever signed, obviously it's a phone contract or whatever, or a contract for a new car. But as soon as you sign that contract, that means that thing is pretty much yours. According to Chris Borden, the main reporter at the Burnley Express, the final hurdle is the EPL fit and proper persons test. It's all up in the air at the minute, though, despite all of that, because it's Chris Farnell. He is apparently bad news. He was one of the guys that nearly ran Charlton into the ground. He did run Bury into the ground. I think he ran Salisbury City into the ground. He was at Wigan when they nearly went into administration. He's been at Bolton. And essentially his background is sort of like helping people with less. Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, apparently he's sort of like he's the go-to guy if you are the less than reputable person who wants to buy a football club. So he obviously claims that it's all media talk and things like that, and he didn't necessarily. Apparently, the issue with Charlton was that he made an administrative error, and it wasn't his sort of like remit or whatever. But again, that just makes him sound like he's incompetent rather than he tried to purposefully kill Charlton Athletic. I don't want someone who's incompetent on the Burnley board or being part of a team who buys Burnley. I don't want an administrative mistake that he makes to send us into League One, for example. But with ALK Capital, they seem a little bit more, grounded, a little bit more, basically less charlatans. So it's again, I don't know how either of them as men and what they can and can't do for Burnley Football Club, but we do need a change though. As much as I appreciate everything Mike Garlick's done for us, we are where we are basically because of him and Sean Dyche. But I think the club has grown so fast in the last 3-4 years, especially since being established as a Premier League club and then getting into Europe and 2 top 10 finishes. It's grown too fast for Mike Garlick. He don't get me wrong, he's obviously a very intelligent man who's done very well in life. He's a multi-millionaire. But in terms of Premier League money, he's nothing. I think he's worth about £50 million. You know what I mean? And that, I think the nearest one after that is 250 million at Sheffield United. It's just when it comes to Premier League money, he's so far behind the rest of the chairman. And we're not expecting Sheikh Mansour to come in and have billions upon billions of pounds. We just need someone who can take us, not even take us to the next level, but keep us where we are. Because if you look at the size of the clubs that are coming to the Premier League now, you've got Villa, you've got Leeds, and they're spending a lot of money now. Villa have spent £200 million 2 summers running, for example. Fulham like to spend money. Obviously, they're not necessarily a big club, but they like to spend money. Leeds have not been shy in the transfer market. So we need somebody that's going to help the club not go backwards, essentially, which I think is what's happened this summer, because so many people left. And then we only signed Dale Stephens for 900k. And that's just, we're going to go backwards if you do that every single summer. So I think for me, the club went backwards this summer, and it's not acceptable. You need to be constantly looking at how you can improve, striving for the next step. And I think we've tried to stand still, but in doing that, because other clubs have moved so far forward and so many players left, we've actually taken a step back, and now we're looking over our shoulders.
What needs to happen at Burnley, obviously, to sort of take them from this sort of state that they're in at the moment to a side that, well, at least keeps them where they are, but sort of becomes sort of a challenge for Europe?
I think Mike Garlick just needs to be less pessimistic, if that makes sense. I understand why he doesn't want to spend money, but I think the extent in which he's doing it is getting a bit ridiculous now. I've seen it online quite a lot that he doesn't want to turn Burnley into another Bolton, and that he's going to spend too much money, get relegated, and never have a bunch of financial troubles after they get relegated, which nobody wants to happen, obviously. But I think the extent in which he's not spending money is just getting ridiculous, especially considering what Sean Dyche has done for that club. He deserves to get a bit of money to spend, and with Sean Dyche in charge, I think it's unlikely they're ever actually going to go down. I know they're in a bit of trouble at the moment, so we'll see what happens there. But certainly they can stay out this season. There needs to be a change in the mentality of the ownership next summer.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know who's going to obviously take over Burnley ultimately, but I feel like even if a new owner came in and started, unless it's Alan Pace, obviously we've just said before, as an admirer of Sean Dyche, it feels like things need to change, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the not too distant future Sean Dyche moved on from Burnley. Obviously, as a result, I feel like we need to talk a lot more about the future of Burnley, and obviously Burnley will never sack Sean Dyche, nor should he, because he's been a fantastic manager to them, but he could move on. And obviously I got asked a few questions on Instagram and on Twitter about different things, and one of the questions I was asked is, after so many years of Dyche, if he does move on, who sort of comes in to fill that position? Obviously, there was an article, I think, not so long back in the Daily Mail that sort of gave the names Mark Hughes and Lee Johnson. We're not going to be talking about Mark Hughes and Lee Johnson, because even though that could happen, we're going to be a bit more adventurous in terms of, obviously, selections and what have you, because I think both of them are pretty sort of rubbish managers. I think obviously Lee Johnson did a good job at Bristol City, but obviously things declined there. I don't think his level is Burnley. Mark Hughes was finished about 15 years ago. Plus, did he not do the research? I'm pretty sure he was Blackburn manager for about 10 years. So I don't see that.
Yeah, exactly. Don't want him anywhere near it, even without his Blackburn connection.
Yeah, he's a totally rubbish manager. But obviously, like I said, I want to caveat this isn't saying Burnley should replace Sean Dyche. This is just being realistic in terms of future-proofing the club. Have either of you got a name? Because I have, but
I always go back to when we were first in the Premier League, and obviously Owen Coyle left and he went to Bolton, and his famous quote was, "Bolton are 10 years ahead of Burnley, that's why I'm here." 10 years on from that now, Bolton are in League 2 and Burnley are finishing top half in the Premier League, so that worked out, didn't it, Owen? Not Owen Parks, obviously, Owen Coyle. So I always look back at that and I think what happened were there. Admittedly, Brian Laws was a terrible manager in the end, but I think one of the main reasons why that didn't work was because is that the styles were too different. Like Owen Coyle was a passing sort of like attacking manager. We'll try and score one more goal than you sort of vibe. Whereas Brian Laws was a little bit more defensive. And I think the styles were far too different. And that's part of the reason why it didn't work. So I think I'd want to do something where I keep it sort of like a similar style. So the obvious one for me would be sort of like Chris Hughton, but obviously he ended up not working out at Brighton because they decided they wanted a change of ethos, and whether that's a club thing and we're less likely to do that because obviously we haven't done it with Dyche, would be another thing. So I wouldn't mind giving him a go, but obviously he's at Forest now, so if it happened today, which I don't think it would, to be fair, I think we've probably got another season of Dyche. I won't mind Alex Neil at Preston either. He's done all right at Preston, but it's one of them that I don't really pay too much attention to because Dyche has been there, like you say, for 8 years today. So I don't look at other managers and think, oh, I'd have him at Burnley because I'm happy with Dyche. You know what I mean? But it's one of them. They're the two names that I'd probably stand out at the minute, but I've not been looking too much into new managers, to be honest.
No, nor should you, obviously, because of Sean Dyche's achievements, but it was more me thinking about sort of the articles that have come out saying he's unhappy. 8 years is a long time. I wonder how long he could keep the story going. It's just, realistically, at some point, you're going to have to future-proof the club. Obviously, I'll give a couple of names I was thinking of. One realistic, one's more dream in terms of seeing them in the Premier League. And then I'll ask Aaron. The first name, obviously, I could think of is Millwall's Gary Rowett. Obviously, Gary Rowett's been around the Championship a long time now. Never been given a Premier League opportunity. Obviously, he failed at Stoke, which sort of blighted CV, but in Birmingham and Millwall now he's always done a good job. So he plays quite a similar sort of style to Dyche. I think Millwall play 4-3-3 or 4-4-2. So I think he could be a good option. I think he'd be my realistic sort of shout for me. The other one probably isn't realistic at all, considering he's foreign, and I don't see Burnley appointing a foreign manager. Maybe if a takeover happens, maybe, but as long as Mike Garlick said, I don't think Burnley will appoint a manager from overseas. But that would be Getafe's Jose Bordalas. Plays a very similar style to what Sean Dyche does. Maybe presses a bit more, maybe more direct, but I think they're two adaptable managers for Burnley, what I would be looking at in terms of sort of realistically could take over Burnley. Aaron, have you got any sort of idea where Burnley could go in the future?
I knew you were going to say Jose Bordalas, by the way, the whole time. Yeah, I think you've really covered the type of names that Burnley would likely look at. It's really about, who takes over, if this ownership thing's going to go through, and what mentality they have next summer if Sean Dyche does leave. Because, for all we know, they could try and change their approach. Maybe do go completely against what Burnley are known for at the moment and go trying to become more expansive. We don't know. But I think the likelihood is they're probably going to stick with this sort of manager. And like I said, I think those names are definitely the type of managers that they would look at should Sean Dyche leave.
Yeah, obviously I completely agree. So we'll be a little bit less morbid and hope Sean Dyche stays forever, and and sort of move on for that. But it's not a criticism of Dyche. This is more of a criticism of obviously the recruitment at the moment. Is one thing that someone highlighted to me, and obviously I bring up, and I've noticed it too, is that Burnley are quite slow in terms of they don't have many players who are lightning quick, and for a team that doesn't dominate the ball, Do either of you think that could be a problem long term, not buying? I think it's a right-sided winger. Obviously, McNeil's fine off the left, and Brownhill, Westwood, decent through the middle. The back four, I think, are balanced. Up front, you can get away with Wood and Rodriguez, but do either of you think that Burnley should have a right winger who is main sort of remit is pace? I'll go for you, Joe. Is that something you've noticed, or?
It's the right side. The entire right side for me, I think, is the weakest part. We've needed a right-sided midfielder for years, man. But it's one of them that we have JBG and Brady, but they're just so injury prone, man. Like JBG's got a calf niggle again now. So the last time we bought a decent winger was Robbie Brady, and we signed him about 3.5, 4 years ago. It's one of them. We've needed we're crying out for it this summer. We're crying out. The amount of injuries that Brady and JBG have got, but Burnley tried to risk it because Burnley tried to do it on the cheap like they always do. And they're like, oh, well, these two have come back, so they might do a good job this season. But lo and behold, one game in and JBG's injured, 2 games in and Brady's injured, and now JBG's got another niggle and Brady's not played since. So yeah, we're definitely crying out for a winger, even just for numbers, especially after letting Hendrick go, just for numbers. But in terms of actual first team winger, then yeah, you need somebody who's a bit more like Dwight Mignolet to make the side a lot more balanced, who will get the ball and run at players. But we also need another right back as well, because Matty Lawton, as much as I like the guy, he's a really nice bloke. He's been on the podcast. I think his better years are behind him. And as for Phil Bardsley, as much again as I love him because he loves to tackle, and that's what we like at Burnley, I think he's the wrong side of 32. I think he's even older than me. He's Phil Bardsley. So I think, yeah, we definitely need a new right side, I think, and that's one of the first things I hope the ALK, if they are the new owners, come in and do.
Yeah, I think the problem was worse when you had Jeff Hendrick there. Obviously, I quite like Jeff Hendrick, but again, I thought like any sort of attack that went down that side was sort of limited due to obviously his limitations being sort of a cover midfielder rather than a player there to affect the game. But Goodmanson, we'll see. It's good that Goodmanson and Brady are both fit, because if one of you'd trust at least between them to complete 90 minutes. Even if one of them gets injured, obviously you'd hope that one of them, between them, that they can do 90 minutes. Maybe it could be a case that Dice plays one for 45 and the other for 45. I don't know, but obviously I think we'll sort of end the podcast now by asking you a quick question. Obviously, Burnley have started the season quite poorly. Do you expect Burnley to stay up this season? Joe, what do you think?
I'm a little bit worried, to be honest with you, mate. But the signs are there. We're getting better. We haven't actually won a game yet, but in terms of performances, the performances are getting better.
Yeah.
We just need to start games now and put the ball in the back of the net. But I'm currently just gonna err on the side of yes. But I tell you what, if we get beat against Chelsea, then get beat against Brighton, we'll quickly change that to a no, definitely going down.
Yeah. Aaron, what do you think Burnley will stay up?
I think it's very tough to tell, just because they've looked so poor so far this season. But then again, with Sean Dyche in charge, there's always a chance that they can stay up. I think it's all about how he takes advantage of some of the poor quality in the league. I mean, I know the likes of I know Villa are top of the league, or near the top of the league anyway, and West Ham are pretty comfortable at the moment. But this is just based off what I thought at the start of the season. I thought both would be in relegation battles. So who knows what will happen with those sides, whether they'll drop off and Burnley could take advantage. At the moment, I do think they'll probably stay up, but I think it's tough to tell whether they'll be comfortable or whether they'll be in a relegation scrap towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm going to be positive. I think Burnley will finish 15th. I think that's ultimately where I'm sort of going for at the moment. I think
I'd rip your hand off for that right now. 15 sounds very, very comfortable.
Yeah, if I'm going to, I think the bottom three for me will be Fulham, West Brom, and Brighton. I think Sheffield United will just be outside there, and they expect Newcastle's sort of XG defying luck to sort of catch up with them, and they will finish 16th, even though I think they've started pretty well. I know we're playing them Sunday, and they'll beat us after me saying that, but I'm going to roll with the punches anyway, and hope that they somehow trip up and finish 16th. I think Burnley will be 15th. But apart from that, I would like to say thank you to Aaron, thank you to Joe, and we'll see you next time.